welcome to this new class, new chapter, Culture and Globalization. This is a short chapter and it goes with the one we just finished on culture. Since nowadays we live in a globalized world, um, this has a huge impact for anthropologists because it does affect our culture. So we also need to look into that briefly and just to discuss how globalization is affecting culture and how can we study cultures in a globalized world. First, let's start with a definition of what globalization is, and then we will carry on with some concepts. Globalization, you might know that already, but the term globalization refers to the worldwide intensification of interactions and increased movement of money, people, goods, and ideas within and across national borders. So now we live in a globalized world since the first industrial revolution, and so this was in the middle of the 19th century, and it keeps increasing. So every year, the economic world that we live in gives us this idea that the world becomes more and more small. We can communicate with someone that now lives miles away from us. We can send money from one place to another in 1 second. Same for messages. We can travel across the globe in only a few hours, whether it used to take months before. And we can, of course, benefit from those interactions, and we can buy whatever we want. We can taste food from different countries, and we can experience the world just by staying at one place. This is what we call globalization. So how this big movement is actually affecting our life. I would like you please to think of the following questions. Basic questions. Try to think of how globalization is transforming culture. For example, what type of music are you listening to? What do you watch on TV? What do you eat? What do you do on your free time? What do you read? And look at your closet. What stories do your clothes tell? If you think, for example, of this new TV show that just came out a few weeks ago, Squid Game, the South Korean one, more than 30 million people watched it already. Can you imagine? It's something that never happened in the history of Netflix. And this is the kind of impact I'm talking about. Or, for example, food that we eat. We can now have access to many different types of food, even in our home country. Or, for example, clothes that we wear, they are, for a lot of places, more westernized than it used to be. So these are the changes that I'm referring to. And if you consider your generation, for example, compared to your parents or compared to your grandparents' generation, you will find a huge, or at least a difference between the yourself and the previous generations. So this is what I meant, those kind of changes. I'm not saying that those changes are bad. I'm not saying that they are good either. I'm just saying that they exist. And as anthropologists, we need to observe those changes, and we need to pay attention and to listen carefully to what they are telling us. And we have to observe what do they say about the culture itself. There is a big debate and there is a fear. So when it comes to change and to changing culture and communities, there are two main trends. First, there is the idea that all cultures will become the same. This is the idea of what we call homogenization. Homogenization, so it's when something is similar everywhere, when there is no more differences between cultures, right? When it's homogenized. So here there is a fear of homogenization. When we talk about globalization, it's probably the first thing that comes to our mind, that cultures are getting more and more similar, and because we all watch the same type of series, for example, of movies, we tend to all wear the same type of clothes, we tend to eat the same types of food and to drink the same soft drinks, for example, if you think of Coca-Cola, for instance. So this is what I meant by homogenization. However, even though it's a fear and we should all be aware of those dangers, research that have been done at different locations, different places, show that there is actually different dynamics of indigenization. So here, instead of being homogenized, actually, it seems that culture tends to um, adapt to a place. So it's the term here, indigenized, right? That's what I mean by indigenization. It means that a culture will adapt to some external trends, and it will um, so it seems that cultures locally adapt to a specific change. So if you take, for example, McDonald's, um, which is the most iconic example of globalization, McDonald's had to adapt to some places and couldn't afford the same type of burgers than in the US. So, depending on where you are, in Morocco, in India, in Japan, the burgers that you will eat will not be exactly the same because McDonald's had to adjust to some local fashions and habits and what we call culture. So this is what I mean by indigenization. It's the adaptation of culture to a place. All right, so this is what anthropological research have shown. Now let's move on to globalization and anthropology, and let's go back to the question how globalization has impacted culture. There are many ways. Of course, when I ask you those questions at the beginning, what do you eat? What do you wear? What do you listen to? What do you watch? What do you read? And so on. You have all, I'm sure, noticed that, of course, globalization is changing your habits. And again, if you compare with previous generation, you will find that it is different. So it has an impact. The first one that I would like to discuss is the time-space compression. What do I mean here? I mean the rapid innovation of communication and transportation technologies associated with globalization, right? So this transforms the way people think about space, about distances, and it transforms also the way people think about time, because nowadays we can send emails. You see, you can follow a class, online class. I live in Dubai. Today I'm in Nairobi, in Kenya, giving this class. So the notion of space and distance and time as well is completely different than it used to be. So that's the first one. Then here, increasing migration. More and more people are traveling, and more people are leaving their home country to go and experience a different life somewhere else. Most of the time, they do that because they are seeking for more economic opportunities. But it's not only the case, but it could be, right? So people are traveling and they are exposed to different cultures more than it used to be. Before, people were born at one place, raised, they stayed there, they had family there, and they usually died in the same place or nearby the place that they were born to. So nowadays, this is completely different. People are moving and they are circulating more and more. This increases what we call cosmopolitanism. So cosmopolitanism, it's made of two Greek words, cosmos, that means world, and polis, that means city. So like the world is a city, and and this means basically that people would feel that they belong to the world, that they are world citizen first before defining themselves as being from one nation or one country or another. So they feel that they are connected to other humans living on Earth. They feel that they belong to the Homo sapiens species, and that we are all somehow connected. So this is what it means here, increasing cosmopolitanism. And finally, an even development. So here, basically, the unequal distribution of the benefits of globalization. This is also a sad consequence of globalization. So goods and wealth and money are not well spread across the globe, and there is an uneven distribution between people, sadly, and globalization is also somehow increasing that. There is another impact caused by globalization, very important one. This is the impact on the environment. So humans, they have showed across time that they have a strong ability to adapt. This is for sure. However, we reach a point, we reach a level that has never been reached before. Nowadays, we live in a world where us, when I say we, I mean humans, we modify, we shape our environment. And researchers, anthropologists, but also a geographer, they have created a word to discuss that. It's the word Anthropocene. So we live in this era, the time in which human activity is reshaping the planet in many different ways and in permanent ways. So Anthropocene, it describes the current historical era in which human activity is reshaping the planet in many ways. So what do I mean here by reshaping the planet is, for example, deforestation, right? Removing trees in Amazonia, for example, to plant soya instead and to feed animals. It's, for instance, reshaping mountains in order to get stones or to get minerals or to get any resources needed for human. It's, for example, creating big cities such as Dubai, where there were nothing before. Dubai was just a big desert before, and this city came out of nowhere. It's, for example, creating canals to cross from one place to another. So, for example, the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. And it's, for example, I added a picture here, affecting the other species living on the planet. For example, this bird, you might have seen this picture before. This bird, this albatross, died because it ate a lot of plastic. As you can see here in his belly, there are a lot of little pieces of plastic. So sadly, we are impacting also the other species living on Earth. And nowadays, humans are um, perceiving themselves as being on top of the pyramid of imaginary pyramid of species, and humans consider themselves as superior than other species. I say that in general. I know it's not everybody that thinks this way, but this creates an context in which other species are affected by what humans are doing. So this is the Anthropocene. That's what we call Anthropocene. I will post a video for you to watch. It's a very relevant video explaining what exactly is Anthropocene and what are the consequences. And finally, I wanted to end this chapter. I told you it would be a brief one, with just a question. For example, if you look at those cans of Coke, what can you learn about yourself, your culture, or globalization in general out of a can of Coke? If you think of just a regular can of Coke, do you drink that often? Is it available where you live? Is it expensive? Does everybody buy it? What does it say about your culture? And that could be something that we could discuss on the WhatsApp group, or you can send me any comment about this if it inspires you to share a story or to share your view on this topic. I thank you very much for today's class. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you very soon next week to talk about methodology. You will have a quiz. I will post a quiz shortly, so please get ready.